whiskey from the viewpoint of an American here in Germany, together with
Paul Aston
from Deerstalker. We're going to do a little bit of a interesting history lesson, and we're also going to have a little bit of the opportunity for me to try something. All right, Deerstalker, what is that exactly, if I may ask here, Paul?
Well, it's a good question, because I think it's a question probably a lot, if I'm on a stand somewhere, a lot of people ask. So really, what is a Deerstalker is probably what you want to know. If you really look at it, if you look at an estate in Scotland, you really have four things on an estate. You've got salmon, you've got grouse, you've got deer on the estate, and you've got forestry. And the role of the Deerstalker is really to manage the herd of deer that are on that estate. And to put it into perspective, about 40% of the red deer population in Europe will reside in and around the Highlands.
I did not know that. Interesting. Okay.
So that's a lot of deer. And what a Deerstalker will do is he'll take the estate guests out to photograph the deer, or in some cases to cull the deer, because there are no natural predators. We don't have wolves in Scotland, although they're talking about bringing them back, interestingly enough.
Ooh, in northern Germany, we have the wolves. They started eating all the sheep instead.
Yes. Well, if they were here, then they'd probably cull a few deer, I guess. So,
yeah.
So really a Deerstalker is a gamekeeper. He has to manage that estate, and along with the guys that are looking after the salmon, the grouse, and the forestry. And it's something that's been going on for 200 plus years. It probably became greater prominence really during the time when Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who obviously was German, came across and spent a lot of time in Scotland, because they settled in an estate called Balmoral. And all the elements related to the Highlands, such as sort of clans, tartan, deer stalking, all these elements suddenly came to the fore. And instead of being known in Scotland, suddenly people in London were hearing about, these independent guys called Deerstalkers, gamekeepers. And suddenly you had this sort of influx of people who were suddenly a sort of huge interest. And that helped to build the interest in Scotch whisky. So that was really one element. Another element, Jason, is this, which actually I think you've probably seen before.
Yes.
Which is the Deerstalker hat. It's basically worn like that. And it's got flaps at the top, which you then pull down. There we go. And you tie them underneath your chin. And the thing is that if you're out in the cold and the wind and the rain, it's actually a very practical thing to wear. Obviously, if you're walking around the town, you probably look slightly odd. But it is actually a very practical thing to wear. And, of course, there is a character who is well known, which you'll probably just about see. This is a sort of, this is the sort of Benedict Cumberbatch version of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes obviously was a character that was created, a fictional detective, and it was depicted wearing a Deerstalker hat. So very often, if you say the word Deerstalker, pretty much everybody comes back to you and says, Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, so that's really the sort of, if you like, Deerstalker is essentially a gamekeeper, but he happens to wear a hat, which has become associated with Sherlock Holmes. So that's really that's really where the name comes from.
Very, very good. Now, how do we get the connection to the whiskey, though?
Right. Good. Well, this is basically try and get it so you can actually see it. That is a label. Deerstalker Old Highland Whiskey, that was registered in about 1880. And a company based in Leith in Edinburgh called J.G.Thomson registered, and that was the first label that went onto a whiskey bottle, the first Deerstalker label. So it really can trace its origins back to about 1880.
Okay. They
were a wine and spirit merchant, and what they did was that was their house brand of whiskey, and they sold it throughout the 1800s and 1900s in many, many parts of the world, Far East, right the way through to the US. So it actually, that's really where it started. J.G.Thomson eventually were acquired by a larger company called Bass, and my involvement was in about 1990 when I worked for Bass, and we set up a company, Deerstalker Whisky, and we actually bought the Deerstalker brand. So my association with Deerstalker really started in 1994 when the company was started. But I'd actually been selling Deerstalker, if you like, through J.G.Thomson for a few years before.
Much longer. Okay. Very, very good. So I'm just going to say hi to a few people that have been watching here. We've had up to 15 people actually watching at the same time. There's a Stefan Bischoff is there. Very, very good. Laz is actually watching. We have here Tim from the Whiskey Botschaft. Maybe you know him.
I know Tim very well.
And there's also Blind Whiskey has actually commented so far. So good. He's having problems seeing the picture. He can hear us, but he can't actually see us. So let's see if he can restart or whatever. That's very, very good. Now he says, now it works. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Very, very good. So you can see the comments as well. When there's something important, I'll put it up there. So for all my German viewers, this is on my English channel. And so it'd be great if you'd actually write in English if possible. If not, I will translate and we'll make this happen. Today, we're talking about Deerstalker whiskey. And I have the owner, proprietor here from Paul Aston. And the thing that was really, really interesting is 1994, you bought this brand from this other J.P. Thomson?
J.G.Thomson, yes.
Exactly. Where were they located originally?
Well, J.G.Thomson were located in Leith, but they were located in a building called the Vaults. And the Vaults today is used by the Scottish Malt Whisky Society.
SMWS, yes.
So it still has a very strong affiliation with whiskey. It's a great building. It's very old. It essentially was an office in a warehouse.
Yeah.
The reason that it was constructed was that it's in Leith, and Leith is the port for Edinburgh. And at that time, Leith was a very, very busy port, particularly for wines and spirits, because it was a safe port. And obviously that was the time when there was quite a lot of conflict between England and France, probably not dissimilar to today. But essentially what was happening was that a lot of French wine would come into Leith. So it was a busy place, and naturally whiskey would be exported from Leith. So it was a place where wine and spirit merchants would be based. So that's where J.G.Thomson were.
Excellent, excellent. Now you gave me two samples here. I have the 12-year-old Highland single malt. Now I assume you don't have your own distillery now, do you?
No, unfortunately not. The way Deerstalker works is it's really an independent bottler. And what we do is we look at different whiskies. I work particularly closely with somebody called John McDougall, who has a great reputation. He's worked in X number of distilleries and has been a distillery manager. He's worked all sides of the business. And he helps me in terms of sort of selecting whiskies, particularly if we're looking at actually putting a couple of whiskies together. But as you say, the first whiskey that we're going to try, which is this is a Deerstalker Highland single malt, 12 years old. And the whiskey in here is a whiskey called Balmenach. Now, Balmenach is just in the southern part of Speyside, and it's owned by Inverhouse, who we've been very lucky to work with for actually in excess of 40 years. Deerstalkers has been, if you like, Balmenach has been a Deerstalker bottling for at least 50 years that I know of. And the reason for that is that it's a great whiskey. There's quite a bit of history behind it. It was one of the sort of oldest licensed distilleries in Scotland. It's a traditional sort of method of distilling, I would say. The pot stills are actually quite short, so the result of that really is you get quite a rich sort of meaty spirit. But at the same time, it's got really all the elements that you would expect from a single malt. I mean, there's a bit of peatiness there, and there's a bit of sort of floral terms. So it's got a lot to offer. So feel free to try it, Jason, if you've got...
Very good. When I was in the Speyside in March of this year, I wanted to actually do a tour there. It was kind of difficult to get a tour. That's very, very limited opportunity there, and you needed to bring a little bit more time than usual. I think it was almost a 3.5, 4 hour tour is what they do with you there. And I was there, and as I said, I tried to do 14 distilleries in 4 days, and it just didn't fit into my schedule as I wanted it to. But that's one place I'd really, really like to go back to, and I've heard many, many different things. All right, good. So just run me through this now. On the nose, you said more floral notes, which would be more the Speyside, but of course, Speyside somehow belongs to the Highlands, right?
Yeah, I mean, we bottle about 2 to 3 casks, so these are quite small scale bottlings in the great scheme of things.
Are they a couple thousand bottles, or what would you say?
Let's say, well, you're sort of 250. That's about right. I was looking at about 250 plus cases, so you're talking to under 1,000. Yeah.
Okay, case is usually 6 bottles, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a sort of dark amber color. I think you get sort of heather on the aroma. You tend to get sort of a bit of heather, I would say. A sort of bit of fresh barley, and then I think when you start to taste it, there's definitely. I've always thought there's a little bit of sort of spice on the 12-year-old, which I think is sort of quite welcome, because I think when you get to sort of 12, you want something that's not just sort of giving you one particular tone. And I would say that I think with the 12, you do tend to get heather, you get spice, and you still get something that's sort of slightly floral. So I think it offers quite a lot, but equally it's balanced. You're not getting something that's overpowering. We're bottling it at 43%.
The first thing I got was Flora and Fauna, and I had to really just look which one was it, because I did like 14 Flora and Faunas in one weekend. I really just tried to do all that. I think it's more like the Strathhill is what I'm getting here, which is actually a wonderful, wonderful comparison, to be honest. Very nice. So it's you have the heather, you have the floral, but you have a little bit more. You have a dark type of honey in there as well. Nice. I like this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there's a depth to Balmenic, and it's interesting because it was obviously part of Distillers Company, and it was one of the elements that went into Johnny Walker. And I think that it was arguably one of the sort of backbones of that whiskey for quite a long period of time. And it's again, I mean, it's really only available at this point in time as an independent bottling.
Yep.
But I'm sure there will come a period where the house will probably look to release it. But equally, they've got their hands full with Old Pulteney, Al Blair. So it's not as if they haven't got some good single malts already.
That's very, very true. Those are 2 great brands, by the way. And Balmenach actually was a 12-year-old Flora and Fauna, which I've never had before, because it runs about 450 pounds, which was a little bit above my price range at that moment.
Well, we at one stage we bottled Balmenic at 18 years of age, and I have to say that was just spectacular. And that went out to quite a few markets. I know it went out to the US, went into Canada, and it really just was wonderful. It was a sherry finish as well, so it pretty much had everything. But unfortunately, that's just one of those whiskies that you wish you'd put some more bottles by the side, because it was something special.
Hey, Mark, good to see you. And it is 43%, exactly. 12-year-old Highland single malt, a Deerstalker here, 43%. Very, very nice. Would you like to hold up the bottle again so the people can see it? And I will try.
The bottle has it has a picture. It's not 100% clear of a modern day stalker sort of looking out over a glen. It did have in previous years you will see. If you go online, different presentations, but this really is the one that we've had now for about a year and a half.
All right. That's very nice. It's a lot deeper, a lot richer, a lot complexer than I thought it was going to be. I'm almost getting the same. Now I'm almost getting the more of the 13-year-old, which I didn't have the Clealachi moments. Do they have warm tubs?
Yes, they do. Yes,
that's I'm getting that copper contact. That's what I really like that when there's some worm tubs involved in there. Very nice.
It's a real traditional way of distilling, and I mean, if you ever get the chance to go to Balmenic, you can see the worm tubs and the copper pipes just sitting in them, and then you've got the mountains in the background, and I mean, it's remarkable, really, because it is sort of something that probably you're not going to see in many distilleries nowadays. And certainly anything that's constructed, it's not going to have worktop.
Oh, Annandale, I think they actually constructed them now, haven't they?
Did they really?
Yes, they're one of the very few newer ones then that actually use it. Andre, this is someone from Kirsch Importers here in Germany. It's one of them important people there. He's Moin, which means in German hi. Yeah, very, very good to see you there. That's very nice, but it does have a look. It's more of a drying type of astringency. It's not really one of those sherry bombs that just create all that that water influence. It just kind of dries your mouth out a little bit. Not bad, not bad. I like it.
Yes, I think at 12, I would say it sort of sits comfortably. I think for the Deerstalker range that we've had in the past, 10, 12, 15, and 18, and I think that Balmenic at 12 has always been, if you like, our key whiskey. It's the whiskey that we sell most of. It's obviously available in Germany, and the Whiskey Botschaft would be the guys to talk to with regards to all the Deerstalkers, in fact. And I think it represents really just a sort of a good example of a Highland single malt. It's a whiskey that I think is consistent as well. So I think it sort of offers everything you really want from a 12-year-old.
Very good. So you just mentioned that. I'm actually typing in as we talk Deerstalker here. So people in Germany, if anyone's actually watching, can maybe see the site and be able to buy it here. At the moment, it's €39.90. It's actually on sale here, which I'm going to be able to show in a second here in a window. So very, very good. Share screen, Chrome tab, and that's the Deerstalker. Good. Very good. So we have here, it's in German, I'm so sorry. It's the Whiskey Botschaft here in Germany. Deerstalker 12-year-old single malt, 7% off. It used to be $42.90, now it's $39.90. So this is the place to order. I'm sure Tim sends also to the Netherlands. I'm not sure about other countries here in the European Union, but that might just actually be a possibility. If I'm in the US, where would I have to buy it?
You'd either have to go to Canada.
Okay, my friends are in Texas. That might be a long drive, so who knows?
We haven't sold in the US for about 5 years, and the reason, just quite simply, is that obviously the US market is a 75 centiliter market, yep. So you effectively do a separate bottling, and I think that at this point in time, if you like, with the way stocks are of whiskies in general, it isn't something that we'd look at just doing. So unfortunately, we're just at this point in time, it would have to be a European purchase.
All right, very good.
If anybody's got any sort of queries, the URL is just deerstalkerwhiskey.com. So certainly, if there is a question in terms of, well, where can I get hold of it in the Netherlands or wherever, then I can help you out on that. So just go and have a look at that.
Very good. I'm going to post this in the chat as well. And what I like the statement that Stefan here just wrote. I got to go to the Whiskey Botschaft and spend all my Christmas bonus.
I would suggest that's a very sensible way of spending a Christmas bonus.
All right. Very, very good. So one other thing I'll do is I'll just share the screen here once again with our Deerstalker whiskey.com, so we can actually see this here. We have the whiskey company, we have the hat, we have the blended malt, which we'll talk about at the end. We'll talk about the 12-year-old that we're doing now. We'll talk about limited releases in a second. You have a nice little thing here about history, which I really like. There's a lot of information there, and you talk about the contact, and we can actually find you here. You're in Glasgow, and so we can just contact you. info@deerstalkerwhiskey.com, and you'll be more than happy to help us get in somehow contact with your whiskey, right?
Of course. Yep.
And of course, Tim says, thank you very much, Stefan. Hope you will not have any stress or any problems with your wife if he spends all the Christmas bonus there with him. So this is actually a very good whiskey, especially if you consider the price point of 40 euros. I would have put this actually, if I was doing this blind, I wouldn't know what it is. I wouldn't know how much it costs. I wouldn't know the age. I would have went between 12 and 14 years old, and I would not have been surprised if it was 50 euros plus. But hey, the market at the moment is a little bit hot.
Yeah, I think probably we've always pitched it so it's not, it's so effectively it's sort of affordable. I think it's fair to say. I think a number of people have said that really is good value, and I suppose in some ways for a brand like Deerstalker, where if you like, we don't do a massive amount of marketing. I think the key is to offer something that people can approach and try that is not a crazily expensive whiskey. So the 12 has always been that, really. It's been, to me, it's a sort of benchmark whiskey because when we come to talk about limited release, you're then talking about single casks and inevitably small yields, small bottlings, and the price
200 plus bottles usually, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So
one of the telltale signs of a great whiskey for me is when we put some water in it. What happens? Does it flatten out? This actually gets creamier. It's a little bit silkier with water in there. If you take it down like 40%, and it actually has a lot more of that vanilla in there. It doesn't need water, but actually with water, it gets a little bit towards the creamy, silky vanilla side. And I really like this. I'm going to have to talk with Tim and see if I can get myself a bottle there. Who knows?
It's
all right.
interesting because we did it at one stage at 46%, and I think there were two things there. One was that because it was 46%, it was obviously more expensive, and the second thing that I felt was that people just didn't really appreciate. You were paying slightly more for it. That extra sort of 3% was almost wasted because most people would look at 12-year-olds and they look at that segment. And it isn't really a 46% segment. So offering something that arguably had a huge amount of flavor, people were looking at it and saying, well, but it's more expensive than this whiskey. And it did, for me, 40 or 43 is right. And so it's interesting about your point that if you take it down to 40, it doesn't lose that much.
No, actually, I would say it gains a tiny little bit, but that's one of my things. All right, Stefan says the market at the moment is, I would like to say, a bit confused. Some brands are way too expensive, Macallan, and some are way too cheap. Maybe Deerstalker, who knows? Or even Old Pulteney used to be very too cheap. Now they went up, so who knows?
It's a good point. I think the market it's hard to see in a lot of different markets, whether it's in Germany or the Netherlands. I think that there's a lot of confusion at present. So whether it's ever going to settle down is a good question. I don't know. It's all down to what people have got in stock, and who knows.
All right. Andre says I should save my money in the 12. There's going to be something really special at the Whiskey Boat Shaft in the future. We'll see. Maybe we'll see. And maybe I'm going to the Boat Shaft meeting with some friends. I live in the same town. Let's see what's next. All right, Stefan. Good for you. It's for me a good 45 minutes drive over there. So let's move on to the next one, if we may. We have a limited release. This is their second of your three categories that you're in the moment involved in. This is actually, the name is on the bottle. Would you like to talk about this for a moment?
Sure. So we've had the Highland Single Malt, the 12, and if you like, another category that we do is called limited release, and it really means these are single cask bottlings, and we don't do that many. We maybe do between 3 and 6 a year, and what we do is we select a cask and then bottle it normally at 48%. So it's not at full cask strength. And what you get on this in terms of the label is it has everything essentially. It has the cask number, and these are sequentially numbered bottles. So when you look at this, it was bottled on the 12th of August, 254 bottles. So it actually gives you the number on the bottle that you've got. So it is really, in that respect, it's a sort of unique bottling. So it's got that information on the front. On the back, it's just got tasting notes from John McDougall, and then it obviously has an individual carton as well.
All right.
Which again has information on the front and the back.
Okay,
so
very, very nice.
Aim of this really is to pick something that's, if you like, worthy of bottling at a higher strength. This incidentally is 24 years old. So
nice. And this is a single grain, right?
This is a single grain, yes.
Now, not everyone understands the difference between single malt and single grain. So could you explain that first of all?
I'll try. Basically, when you talk about single malt, it's distilled using a pot still. And that really means that it's done on a batch basis. So a certain amount of malted barley is fermented and then ultimately goes into a pot still where obviously the vapors condense and then the whiskey is created. So and then the stillman will turn off the still at a certain point. So essentially, a batch creates a certain amount of spirit, which is then put into a whiskey barrel.
And that's why we can do double and triple distilled for Ireland and so on for Auchentoshan. Now, the continuous still here, our coffee still, that's more our single grain. What's going on there?
Well, the grain distillation is, well, the first thing is that you don't need to use malted barley. You can
exactly cheaper.
So the aim of grain distillation is to produce a spirit which is high in quality, but equally is a lower cost production. And it's lower cost production because it's continuous production. As you said, a coffee still is a continuous production, so it can be fed and just continually distill and produce spirit. So it's not really so crucial that, for example, a grain distillery is in the Highlands because, and if you take North British, which we're discussing, that was located specifically in Edinburgh for two reasons. One, it was close to a main market, Edinburgh. It was very close to the borders, and that's where the grain was sourced for North British. So
North British.
And it was close to a railway terminal, so effectively they
transportation.
And what happened actually is that obviously, when Scotch whisky started, it was all just single malts, and then it was really the likes of the Haigs and the Dewars who went out and actually created blended whiskey. But that was certainly not the first. If you look at whiskey, it didn't start with blended whiskey at all. It started with single malt, and then it moved on to blended malt, and then eventually it got to Scotch whisky or blended Scotch whisky, which obviously is the largest segment.
All right. So Tim says we have on the weekend in Mülheim on the Ruhr here, the Aquavite. That is one of the biggest whiskey fairs in the whole center of, or the western part of Germany. And he has a stand there. If we visit his booth, he will give you a wee dram for free of the Deerstalker. So anyone out there, go to the booth of the Whiskey Botschaft and say, hi, Jason says, I get a wee dram of Deerstalker, or Paul says, and Tim will more than likely introduce you to this whiskey. So this is a 24-year-old single barrel, single grain at 48%. Is it cask strength?
So it's not cask strength. It's the cask was I think 60.1, so taken down to 48. And I suppose, and one question might be, well, why do that? Well, one of the reasons is that you don't get a huge yield if you're bottling cask strength whiskies, and
so this was one of 254 bottles. So let's say we kept it at 60.1%. That would have been more of 180 bottles, which makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference. And I think also if people release the flavor by adding water, then you could still do that at 48. If you do it at 60.1, then you're taking it down anyway. And I just think 48 it does two things. One, it gives you a chance to try the whiskey straight without it burning you completely. And secondly, it allows you then to say, okay, I'm going to take it down. You don't need to take it down that much. And I just think 48 I think it just works. Certainly, we've done it on a number of whiskies, and yes, I know people love cask strength whiskies, but if I'm drinking a cask strength whiskey, I'm actually going to dilute it slightly anyway. So I think 48 is just solid. This is incidentally lowland grain. You can see, for example, we bottle Invergordon, which is a Highland grain. So you still can get that. It still has to appear on the bottle because obviously the region, the Scotch whisky region, is the lowlands. So that's why it's got lowland single grain, which is, again, you don't see that very often. But you're quite right. It's just one cask yielding 254 bottles.
Okay, very, very good. Now, the first thing I get, of course, is vanilla.
Yeah.
I don't. The malt is very, very a little bit hidden. Even it's just like a vanilla candle almost. Now that's exaggerating, but where does that vanilla come from then?
Well, I guess this is a sort of bourbon cask, so I suppose you're going to get. But equally, it's been in that cask quite a long time. But I think probably it's probably that's ultimately going to be where it's going to be picked up from, in my opinion. It's sat in North British distillery, so it's not been influenced by the sea.
No.
So it's not, there's not a lot of humidity. So I would say the sort of vanilla tones probably are coming. I mean, I got a little bit of spice out of it, but I think it's
afterwards. Yeah, but the first thing is just like, okay, that's what I love about the single grains is, first of all, you get that nice vanilla moment, then it moves on to the grains and it goes down a little bit deeper there.
Yes.
Very, very nice. So now this actually costs 80 euros at the moment here, also at the Whiskey Boat Shaft. That's the limited release, North British, 24-year-old. Very, very nice. You get the carton with it as well. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to try this a little bit. I love grains, especially the older the better, usually, in my case. And, of course, North British is, they manufacture literally millions and millions of liters of grain every year. This is a workhorse, isn't it?
Exactly. It's what goes into so many blends. And I suppose the thing with grain is that you probably wouldn't be that interested in trying a single grain at 12 years of age. So it's only really when you get to 17 or 18 years of age that I would say that there's an interesting grain, because you're then beginning, it's sat in the cask for long enough that it's really beginning to pick some flavors out of the cask.
But you have the additive and you have this attractive maturation, and so that's what you need as well. Mm-hmm.
So young grain is, it's perfect from the point of view of putting it into a blended whiskey, but is not really something that you wouldn't say, you wouldn't win any prizes if you were putting out a 12-year-old single cask, single grain. I would say that I don't think there's enough in it to really.
Maybe I can create my own category one day. Who knows? Maybe my own competition, right?
Well, yes. I mean, who knows? I mean, it all depends. If there's some cask management on grain whereby different styles of cask are being used, then yes, maybe there is an opportunity for grain to sort of come out at younger ages.
All right, very, very good. So grains, the hidden single grain is the hidden champ, says Tim here. And once again, I will confirm what Tim said here. Germans love strong cask strength whiskeys. So bring us a 140 euro cask strength whiskey, one batch. I'm sure Tim will be able to sell it all in 1 year, okay? The higher the proof, the better it sells here in Germany, to be very, very honest.
Yeah, I can understand that. I suppose that when you're making an offering, when you bottle a whiskey, you've got. I guess you think you're thinking about a number of different markets ultimately, and I suppose it's how do you please the majority of people. I do understand that doing single. The only thing I would say is that there are a lot of people doing fantastic single casks at full strength.
But not many for grain, so that would actually be very interesting.
Well, that's a point there. That's a good point.
So not them, even the Grain Man and so on, they often take it down to 48% and so on. And so that's actually a little bit of a market there.
Okay.
Just to interrupt us for 1 second, Alan, the whiskey friend, hey, he's a guy up there also. Interesting story. He was a investor, started collecting whiskey, had a fairly large collection. And one day someone said, hey, why don't you try it? He says, nah, I don't like whiskey. He said, why don't you try it? So he opened a bottle and said, I love this stuff. And started drinking after he already had 100+ bottles, or maybe even more. So a very, very interesting guy there, Alan. So beautiful, beautiful thing. All right. Yep. And Stefan can say, Paul, get them cask strengths to those German markets. Yeah, we need that. We love that. That's exactly the same thing everyone always says. We were willing to pay for higher price for more casks for cask strength. That's something Germans actually do. It's like, oh, it's 48%. Nah, it's 60%. Oh, I'll pay 40 euros extra for that. I mean, that's our markets.
Yeah, well, it's good to get feedback. I mean, I'd never rule it out. I suppose if I'm sure there'll be opportunities in the future to do something at full strength.
Yeah.
And we did actually, I think we did actually a North British about 2 or 3 years ago, which was about 22-year-old.
Oh.
Again, one of the reasons for coming back to do grain was I was blown away by the response from that. I mean, that was, people I think were, they really took to it. So I think what's encouraging is that people don't look at grain and turn their noses up at it. It's definitely an opportunity for people to try, and I think there are some fine single grains out there. I mean, I know the Whiskey Botch Shop we did Invergordon, and that will actually be in Melham as well. So
very good.
And that one is 31 years of age, so that's worth trying as well, I would suggest.
Oh, that might be the little bit of the secret that someone was talking about a moment ago.
Yes.
All right. Godhot also has joined here. Very good to see you. Wonderful. I was just looking at the whiskey base and the different things. You did actually a North British ones. Well, I'm sorry. You did a Ben Nevis 1999 that was cask strength in 2017. That was really, I'm sure, an interesting one, that limited release at 18-year-old one.
Yeah.
With 52%. I'm sure that was the hit.
Yeah, that was that went down very well, and I would say it's certainly something that if we could do that again, we would. I mean, Bravel is another distillery that we have done as limited release. I suppose what we're trying to do is obviously try and pick distilleries which are slightly out of the ordinary, and Alta Ben, Bravel are two good examples. So it's all about getting the whiskey. As you probably know, it seems to me that what's happened in the whiskey business is that you've got the big distilleries, and then you've got independent bottlers, and now you've got a completely different category of investors in whiskey who probably have no intention of ever bottling it, but they have their view is, well, we're going to make 10 to 30% a year on this. So they're buying into those stocks, which used to be, if you like, the territory of an independent bottler. Yep. So we're competing with people who are
just investors. Yeah.
So there's a bit of, and I think back to your point earlier that there's a lot of confusion in the markets, and there's fluctuations in price. But I suspect it will settle, because I don't think Scotch whisky is just going to continue to increase at crazy levels. It all depends on what the distilleries do, or the big guys, in my view.
All right. Very, very good. So we talked about your 12-year-old. We've now talked about some of your limited releases, but you have a third direction in your market that is also the blends, right?
Yes. This is an area which actually certainly Tim and Michaela have done a lot of work on in terms of sampling, I know. And that's actually, so this is a blended malt. And I think the first thing is to almost throw away that term, because really you're talking about pure malt. What it is it's 6 single malt whiskies, which
it's like a Johnny Walker green label. Excellent.
And I think that if you go back into the history of Scotch whisky, it obviously started with single malts.
Yeah.
And these were very small. A lot of them were very small stills. The next category that developed was pure or vatted malt, because what happened was that a lot of the production from these small stills was not that great. What people did was they put them together, so you get about 5 or so 6 small stills, small bottles from those stills, and they put them together, and they effectively create a pure malt or a vatted malt. And that really smoothed out the rough edges on those whiskies. So you ended up with something that was quite drinkable and was consistent. And this is long before we got involved with grain. So this category actually is hugely underrated, because you're effectively drinking 6 single malt whiskies that have been brought together and put back into a cask for 6 or 9 months. So you really got the best of the best. And we have 2 versions. We have the peated edition and the Highland edition.
Which you had also when I was at the trade fair. I said, no, thank you. I'm not a big peated fan. That's the reason why I don't have that today.
And directly behind me is actually the label for the Highland edition. And the basic difference being that if you can see the peated edition, it's obviously got green at the bottom.
Okay.
So we have whiskies here, some of which are from Islay, but the majority are Highland whiskies. And they're different ages. They're everything from 6 to 11 years of age. As I said, being brought together, selected by the master blender that we use, who's John McDougall. They're not heavily peated. If you look at the sort of top end of the scale and the Lafroigs, in terms of ppm, phenol parts per million, you're looking at 40. This is around about 18, 19. So this is really, I describe it as lightly peated. And it's really, if you're thinking of trying a peated whiskey, this is a fabulous one to start with, because it's fairly light. You can pick up, there's smoke there, there's sort of burnt wood, coffee flavors, but it's not overpowering. And it was interesting when I was in with the Whiskey Bot Shaft this summer, somebody came along to me and they said, I like this whiskey because I can drink it and I can then go out and have a meal and my taste buds aren't blown away. So it offers something that I would say the majority of peated whiskies do not, which is it's light enough and approachable. So that would certainly be my recommendation, Jason, in terms of when you're looking at the different whiskies that we do. Look at the sort of pure vatted malt, which obviously has blended malt on it. Look at that, because it offers something a bit different. And the Highland edition is the same. It has that's actually got 7 single malts in it, right from the northern part of the Highlands down to the southern part. It actually has a little bit of Balmenic in it. It has some Macduff. So it's got some really nice malts in there. They're both approachable, easy to drink, really good value whiskies.
All right, very good. I'm going to share the screen again real quick. What we have here is the Deerstalker Highland malt for $29.90 at the moment here at the Whiskey Boat Shaft. And we have this actually received 94 of 100 points from Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible 2016. And we have here the peated. You can see the green here. That's a little bit there for $32.90. At the moment, there's only 1,040 bottles of that. And it has about 18.5 ppm, so it's not bad, but it's enough that you can realize that. Very, very well done. All right, thank you, Paul. That's very, very good information. As you can also see, Stefan here is a little bit of a fan. He has all 3 of them, and they are like an everyday dram. The more you get, the better they got.
They're both at 43%. Yep. So that's really, I think they work well together. I think. You've got Highland Edition and you've got peated, so you really got, you could sit there of an evening and you could really almost do a sort of whiskey masterclass just by starting with those 2.
Very nice, yes. And those 43% priced €30, €32 is exactly at the right price. We can't complain about that at all. Well done. Very nice, very nice. So we have the 12-year-old, we have the limited releases, and then you have your blends, the peated as well as the Highland. Very, very good. All right, great. Anything we can look forward to in the future when you're coming back to Germany?
Well, I'll definitely be back for the whiskey fair, but hopefully I'll get back before then.
In Captain every year there, yes. And
yeah. So I mean, I've been to Mulholland before, and that's a great fair. So I wish Tim, Michaela, and the whole of the team there a good weekend, because I'm sure they will have a good time.
It will be a busy weekend. I guarantee you that. Very good. So I'll be there tomorrow on Saturday and on Sunday. So I'll be interviewing people and getting to know new things about the whiskey world as well and trying to share them here.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
a good location and it's a good fair. So I wish everybody who's going a good time. I'm sure they will. Stefan obviously agrees. He knows it.
That's great. All right. If I may land slowly but surely, any last words from you?
All I would say is, for more information, there's obviously the Whiskey Botschaft website, but obviously if you're outside of Germany, just deerstalkerwhiskey.com will give you some information and contact points because, as I said, if you've got any questions, and certainly coming up in the future, yes, there'll definitely be some other whiskies, and it's interesting to hear people's comments with regard to cask strength. Take that on board. If we can get something that we think is worth doing at that, then we certainly will do.
All right, very, very good. So I've just posted that in the Facebook group as well as also in the YouTube group. All right, Paul, thank you very much. The whole reason we're doing the live stream is that we actually did an interview at Kaken at the Whiskey Botschaft Whiskey Fair there on the border to the Netherlands, and my microphone didn't work, and so I just decided, hey, I have the samples, why don't we just do a live stream? And I think it's very, very great that you were here. All right, Andre says, give it a try, which I can totally recommend. Well, thank you very much. Whiskey Jason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American in Germany tasting rare and exotic whiskeys. Usually it's my job to show you things you've never heard about, and often it's recommendable. In this case, very much so. I can highly recommend the 12-year-old, the limited release. I'm not sure if many people will ever have the chance to find that except for the 200 lucky people that get the bottles. Tim says, thank you very much for the stream. Thank you very much, Paul, for the stream. Last words are yours.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that.
All right, all the best. Whiskey Jason says bye-bye.
Bye. Bye from Paul Aston.